Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Time Zones and Time Meters. I'm Josh, the Prog Wanderer. I'm joined by Simon from Simon's Album Reviews. We're here to explore the world of progressive music, its crazy time signatures, epic albums, everything in between. But specifically today, we're going to be talking about albums that have shaped our musical preferences and tastes. So, as normal, I'm going to let Simon say hello and give him the opportunity to sort of take the lead. I think you can start with maybe your first album and we'll alternate, right?
Right. Yeah. That was my plan. And I thought, yeah, since this is, if everything works out, this is the first proper episode, right? So then you also get
Yeah.
to know a little bit where we come from. Yeah. So my first one, I believe I had said that the Beatles with the album Help was it. Although it could basically have been any one of it because it's such a long time ago. I was like 10. And obviously, I was not born in the 50s or 40s, but I found my mom's and dad's LPs, and that's when it clicked for me with music. That's when I really got interested in it, and I was playing those albums so much that even my parents didn't want to hear them anymore, even though it were their records. Um, and I think that, I mean, of course, I started with those more early Beatles albums from around 65 maybe, but eventually I grown to like more the later, more, you know, they were a bit more psychedelic at the end, right? And also sometimes also pretty hard. So they, you also got some proto metal in there with on occasional tracks. Um, yeah. I think that's my first album. I would go with Beatles Help, but it could have been any one of their relatively short discography.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good place to start, isn't it? Especially considering they, responsible for so many influences and changing the music scene in the world. So, for me personally, I've always just known of the Beatles. I'm not a musician, but I think it's a great choice, and I think that for especially where it began, that's really cool, really cool. I actually started mine a little bit later. So so I decided to start mine when I really started to like really listen to music and to fall in love with I guess the sort of genres and stuff that I love the most. And so I was about I'd say like a teenager, somewhere around 2003. I was working with a girl at a coffee shop, and she gave me a lift home from work one day, and she had this band on, and it was a newly released album in Australia, and had a little bit of an underground kind of following. And it begins here by the Butterfly Effect. It's a metal album. It's sort of I don't know. It's pretty textured. It's atmospheric. It's sort of Oh, it sort of pushes onto the edge of sort of that new metal. I know, don't cringe, kind of vibe. But what it was just a sensational singer, and just some really sort of rockin' riffs, and it's a little bit heavier as well. But they were a part of a movement in Australia which really redefined. I guess like this progressive and metal sort of immersion, and the Butterfly Effect were probably a little bit less progressive, but they definitely started something along with a few other bands too. But I absolutely loved this album as a sort of a 19-year-old or whatever I was at the time.
Yeah, we told each other what albums we were gonna go for, and I listened briefly to this one, and oh damn, there's that echo again. Well, but yeah, I really thought like this is such a statement of the time, right? That it's you can really hear that this is around 2000 when it was released.
Yeah, it's look, it's the thing on the album. There's a few really sensational, I think, sort of songs on it, which sort of showcase a sort of a huge melodic sounding vocal over some really heavy sort of, chuggy kind of guitars and stuff. And that to me was by far the cool element that sort of drew me in. And it's a sound that's just kind of stuck with me as I've got older as well. It's when I hear those two things in concert, like, I sort of fall in love with it.
What tracks do you need to check out from this album?
Um, I think there's a track called Consequence, which shows like a really progressive, great build up. It's got some angsty lyrics, which kind of bring back memories as well. So definitely check that one out. I think the big one, yeah, the big one, if I remember correctly, was what was it? There was a few that the world kind of really that were quite big. Beautiful Mind was one that they liked, but oh, that's what it was. It was Without Wings. So Without Wings has a huge crescendo, huge crescendo in it that I kind of really, really love. So probably, yeah, I'd check that out. Perception Twin is the one if you want something that's very of its time, and that's the introduction, right? And so, but for me, probably the better stuff is and showcases Clint's voice a little bit better too.
Right.
What was your number two?
My number two is Black Sabbath, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Because it is, of course, well, I mean, like I said, there were some proto metal with like Helter Skelter and tracks like that from the Beatles, and after that, I wanted more of that, and so maybe a year later, I started to rebel a little bit from my mom and dad's music taste, and I there were several albums. I also got some Deep Purple. I know I bought like two Deep Purple albums, but this album I borrowed from the library. They have like music CDs, at least in Sweden they got that, and it it is also such a scary album, like with the cover and everything, and um, like of course my dad was convinced that Ozzy was a Satanist. So it was really like it was exciting and it was a bit forbidden to listen to this, right? And and I mean it's a sick album. And if we're talking about prog, like it's probably the proggiest, right? They got piano and stuff in it, and it's a little bit, it's going places. It's not just straight up rock. It's yeah, it's a very good album. I think it totally stands the test of time. Although I try to listen to it not too often to really capture that atmosphere that it gave me when I was 11 or something like that. That it really has that, that you get a little tingling in your belly because it still feels forbidden and mystical.
I had to check it out as well. I'm not as familiar with Black Sabbath stuff. I've done a little bit of a dive into them, but this album I had heard of, and I was just checked it out just the other day, and it's great. Like straight up, like it's great. I thought it was really, really cool. A bit more intricate and heaps more proggy than I expected as well.
And
Just
also his
so
voice is super cool on this one. It's
yeah,
really yeah.
it has to be one of his better vocal performances that I've heard for sure. I mean, I definitely have checked out like quite a bit of their discography, just haven't sort of, spent lots and lots of time on it, more so just to sort of set the scene. But yeah, no, I think it was a killer album. And I mean, there was parts of it for me that was a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure, but I'm definitely going to go back to it and just spend some time checking it out.
There's a duo from Canada that sounds a lot like Rush. They released uh, Something Lands. You know what band I mean?
No, no, I can't think
Um,
of who you're talking about.
their singer sounds very much like this. One of the better albums of like 2023, Crown Lands. If you want to hear a singer who kind of sounds like that, you have to check out Crown Lands. So there's a lot more progressive. It sounds a lot like Rush.
Yeah, okay. I'll definitely check him out. I'll
Yeah.
definitely check them out as well.
All right. You're number three. No, you're number two. I mean,
Number two. So I look after sort of discovering the butterfly effect and begins here. I had by chance went to a mate of mine's place, and when I was there, I noticed that album was in his huge wall of like music. And so the thing is that I grew up knowing this guy and knew that he was a huge music guy. He absolutely loved albums, and I'd always kind of just poked at him and thought like nobody knows what you listen to, but because I saw it there, it was just enough to make me go like, oh my God, like what is this? And so him and I got talking about it, and he showed me that he had like one of the first copies ever made as well. Like I think it was the third copy. And so he was kind of like surprised that I'd even heard of them really. And so we got talking about it, and he made a compilation. And he did a compilation every single year because he used to run a metal forum on online. And that compilation was where I started listening to progressive music. So Begins Here kind of started it. It really did begin there, which is kind of the cool thing about it. And the first song that, or one of the first songs that I picked off this sort of like I guess best of, I don't know what year it would have been, probably 2005 or 2000 and it's something like that, was Coat by Carnival. And so Carnival are probably one of the more significant impacting bands on my um, sort of musical discoveries, specifically just because the album rocked, like it was great. And so I grabbed that album from him, borrowed it, if you will, checked it out, and just fell in love. And I really, really fell in love with the unique song structures, the intricate polyrhythms, the really sort of rich atmospheric sort of vibe that they sunk in and out of. And in retrospect, when I look back at it now, it's relatively like accessible. It's easy, it's easy to sort of hear. I think the vocals are really sort of engaging, and the tracks are they're just good. It's a really, really solid album. And that just sort of started my love of things that weren't normal music. The Butterfly Effect was a little bit standard. They had some great musicians, and a good vocalist, but this band just was doing weird shit.
yeah,
And
it's a lot more complex. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I think as well as that too, like there's just a few songs in it where I just went, oh, that sound is just so unique. Like I haven't heard that combination of notes in that order, and so that really sort of drew me in, and it just meant that I kept listening to it, going like, what is it about this album or this track that I just loved, and that's where I'd say this is the progressive beginnings for me. This is when I first started sort of, wondering. Um, best best tracks in the on the album to me would have to be. Look, I fell in love with Fear of the Sky, which most people don't actually like.
All
Um,
right.
it's I think it's probably one of the more progressive kind of tracks on there, and that could be why, if I'm honest. It's got some really lovely like space that they create in it. They change the tone. They come back to the chorus later. It's a banger for me. I love it. I got really behind Lifelike as well. Lifelike was I don't know, where the reviewers all say this is like old school Carnival before they learnt like the real sort of progressive roots of it. But honestly, I think it's killer. Maybe because I was younger, as I said, like just sort of 20-year-old or whatever it was. This was where I really truly sort of went, oh, that's just cool. It's probably one of their more aggressive songs as well. I guess the most sort of new metal-y as well. Oh, cringe, cringe. But it's a banger. It's great. I think the second half of the album's probably a little bit harder to get into for your average person. So most people in Australia who I know might know of this band. They just sort of love the first few. So Coat, if that's how it's pronounced, Thamada, which is the big one. That's the title track. And Rookport is the other one, which I've seen this band play probably like 9 or 10 times live, and when that goes, when they play that, it goes off. So it's a pretty big, it's a much loved track. So maybe check those ones out. Are you that familiar with the band?
I have heard them, and I also enjoyed what I heard, but I have not really taken a deep dive into them. But yeah, no, I appreciate them a lot, and they're totally on my to-do list,
Look,
because
their second album is stellar, and that was the Stamp. But because this kind of influenced me so much and got them into them, I had to include this one instead of their second album. Their second album is a
yeah,
masterpiece. Like it's really great. Their third album, I didn't like it. I like
okay.
two tracks on their third album. So I don't know. I don't
How
know how
many
much.
albums do they have?
They have just the three from my knowledge. Oh, if you
Uh,
don't include their EP. So they
okay,
had Thermata, then they had um, oh, I've just drawn a blank on the second album. Sound Awake, that's it. And the third one was Asymmetry, so the Symmetry. So yeah, that's the sort of three albums. But their second one is just sensational. And I
all right,
think that's the one that most progressive people would check out and probably enjoy the most.
right, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'm also getting into my teenage years with my third choice because it's also the thing what they say, right? That what you appreciate in your teenage years, you always come back to. Like you will never lose your love for that music. That is very what do you call it? Formatting, formational. Yeah, and I because basically I fell out of rock music for a while and ha- did not really have that much interest until I heard The Wicker Man by Iron Maiden on the radio, and I was like, "Holy crap! It's so tight, and you really have these uh, tight guitars, and still it's super melodic. Absolutely love Bruce Dickinson's singing style. Like I was totally blown away. One, so that was in 2000, right? And like 1 year later, I had all the albums and listened to every single one of them more times than I can count. And in the end, Brave New World, which is the album that released in 2000, it is of course the one that got me back on the whole rock track. But from them, I think my favorite is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which is also like the most progressive one from their 80s, at least from their golden era, uh, which is also a thematic or a concept album. So I think that is my favorite one, but I have to go with Brave New World because that really got me back on the music track and made me want to start my own band and pick up the guitar and so super important album for me. Yeah,
Did you say you own all of them?
yeah. At the time, I really had them. I have to say, when I moved from Sweden to the Netherlands 10 years ago, approximately, then I sold my whole record collection and now I only do it digitally. But yeah, totally. I have them all on discs. Yeah,
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I think it's a good choice. Great choice. And it also sort of shows like, because you're doing like every few years nearly like it's like there's a build up and this and. So I love it. I think that's cool. That's good. Um, my third one was look, the funny thing is there's all three of my first three, they're all Australian. They're all local, like all local-ish. One's from like Brisbane, one's from Western Australia. But the third one that I have was they were another one of the sort of I guess this progressive metal vibe, you know, thing that sort of came out of that time, like 2000. I think these guys are a little bit later, like 2006. So I'm picking Dead Letter Circus. And they have an album, I think it was their second album that I really, really loved, and that was called This Is the Warning. And their first one was good. I loved it, and I'd seen them live by this stage as well, like a few times too. But I have to include this album specifically just because it meant a lot to me. It's look, Dead Letter Circus are a bit of a faster pace, so they feel a little bit more punky, I guess. The lead singer is very, very different to, and some people just don't like Kim's voice. I think it's amazing, and he's the probably one of the vocalists, which he kind of for some of the tracks, he sounds more like an instrument than what he does an actual singer. Like it's this really, really unique sound. Maybe not so much on this album. It would have been the first one that they where he was really like that with songs like Alien or whatnot. But this album really meant a lot to me. He has a tendency to sing about sort of conquering your demons and rising up and things not being okay, and it's sort of like how to deal with that. And there's something about that that just sort of resonates with me. And so whenever I'm feeling a bit shitty or a bit crap, I always enjoy like chucking something like this on where I feel like it's cathartic. I get a chance to sing along, belt something out, and just vent. And because of the energy, there's also it stirs up, maybe anger's the wrong word, but you can kind of get your frustrations out a little bit too. It's unique. It's definitely progressive. The drummer is insane, in my opinion. Like this is also the band that really made me go, oh, drums, right? That's cool. And that's when I first really started taking like a lot of note of them. And of course, Carnival, there's some really fantastic sort of rhythms and time signatures, and they jump around a bit too. But this had some tempo and some energy, and I really enjoy that aspect of music as well. So yeah, this is a band that nobody ever knows if they're not from even in Australia, to tell you the truth. And it's also my most seen band. So I've seen these guys play lots. The first time I saw them was in a little Irish pub. There was like 6 people. and I've seen them with huge crowds doing festivals and stuff with the likes of Carnival or Cog as well. I think it was that they played with too. So yeah, no, I think they're great.
Cool,
Um,
cool.
the
So we're pushing for them. Are they still around?
So I think they recently stopped, and I don't know how true that is, but I saw it's written somewhere, maybe in like a Reddit thing or something, that they haven't. So I think I saw one of Kim's last performances. Look, honestly, it was the end of a tour around Australia, and his voice was a little bit sort of shredded, and I have the feeling that just the way that he sings, if he was singing a lot, would probably like really tax his throat. So I don't know if I'm making something up here. But in saying that, I definitely think they might be sort of on the back burner, on a bit of a hiatus. They did release quite a few albums, I think 5 of them roughly. But this one I like. It's they're sort of finding their identity in it as well. So they're still a little bit more experimental, I guess, and maybe not so. Well, some of their later stuff was a little bit overproduced, I think. Whereas this one's maybe a little bit under. But anyway, I love the Space on the Wall. I think Cage, the drums, excellent. Yeah, This Is the Warning's a nice closer as well. It's definitely, yeah, just check it out. Oh, and This Long Hour. Oh, This Long Hour's got some energy. Yeah. What's your have you heard of them at all?
Well, I yesterday I listened to a little bit of the album. It's very energetic, but I mean it's way too early for me to really say something
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
it's a nice diplomatic answer as well.
Yeah, no. No, look, you've chosen more of the obscure. You have some obscure choices. I only have the heavy hitters.
Look,
But
these three are, as I said, they're Aussie, and they impacted me, and they were the stuff that sort of began it all.
yeah, it's still the right answer, of course. Um, but yeah, let's see here. Number four for me. Um, well, like we had this pilot episode where we talked about Dream Theater and how I mentioned that classmates of mine were talking about how Dream Theater were way better than Iron Maiden. They could play their instruments better, etc. And they even said that they would be heavier than Maiden. Um, of course, what I still liked about Maiden is that it was not only heavy, it was not black metal, you know, it was very melodic, right? But but yeah, indeed. And I checked out Dream Theater and I thought, well, another day, what is this saxophone, George Michael sounding stuff? That was not what I was looking for. So like I had them in uh, in the periphery, but I didn't really pay them that much attention. But then there was another band that sounded very good, and I got recommended Symphony X with the Odyssey, which was their latest release. I have to say the band that recommended me this, or the guy who recommended me this, played in a band called Ritual Nemesis, and I remember they sounded just like Symphony X, but I cannot find them on the internet anymore. So I wonder if that was just how it sounded to me then. If they probably weren't as good, but I remember them as super skilled musicians. It would be lovely if someone knows anything about
Have
them.
to. I was just going to say we have to do like an obscure one. So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
we started with three that a lot of people would know,
yeah,
but in saying that, like you know, like the really hidden ones, we'll have
yeah,
to
yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah. Hidden gems. But uh, yeah. So Symphony X was, of course, it is super heavy. At least that album is very heavy. Yet it's very uh, melodic and progressive, and it has like new classical things. Michael Romeo can shred like no other. I mean, he, as a guitarist, he totally blew my mind with how fast you can play and what you can do with tapping. And, you know, that was just unbelievable to me. And of course, what Symphony X has, what Dream Theater didn't have, is like this Dio on steroids as a singer with Russell Allen. I mean, he and also the second track there. It's now I'm forgetting the name of it in the heat of the moment, but um, he really has like this soulful wailing all of a sudden where we go, what? It's like Mariah Carey, but two octaves lower and growl like with distortion. Now it's super skilled singer, super skilled guitar risk, and good songs. And I was totally blown away by this. And this really converted me into the prog metal. And of course, I the other bands that was my favorite at this time were Opeth and Circus Maximus, maybe bit lesser known Norwegian band. Sounds like Dream Theater, but I thought their singer were way better. and this is also the time where I got introduced to more old school prog, uh, like Pink Floyd and a Swedish band called 30-åriga kriget. Now we're going into obscure land. Um, but yeah, that's my fourth choice. Symphony X, the Odyssey,
This
five
is
out
the
of five
coolest thing.
toasters.
This is the coolest thing about this like thing we're putting together is just that you're going to be talking about stuff that I've never heard of before, and there's a good chance that I would be too. Like we're talking totally different like time zones, totally different hemispheres, and I really hope that as we continue, you know, doing this, that I'll get to access like this hidden trove of you know European music, which would be really cool. Especially considering I know I've mentioned three Australian bands, but to tell you the truth, probably my favorite acts tend to be European anyway. It's probably a good segue for me. My fourth one is Riverside. So Riverside's Second Life Syndrome is to this day still probably one of my favorite albums of all time. I think it stacks up and it's incredible. And when this was released in, I think it was around 2005, it was right when I was like listening to these other bands and going like, oh my God. And these guys just, you know, knocked the ball out of the park. It's the first time I ever really listened to anything that would be regarded as like an epic as well, with, you know, Second Life Syndrome being, I think it's about 15 minutes. But so that was really like, what the hell is this to me? Like, but it was, you know, and probably is one of the greatest tracks I've ever heard. This is a Balzer album, and this is probably the, I don't know, it's up there with the epitome of sort of music. I think it's texturally rich. There's lots of sort of atmosphere. There's it's just the composition of it's beautiful. And all of the songs just go so beautifully together as well. Like
Yeah.
this is an album that's constructed from beginning to end, and it just is so smooth. You know, Duda's vocals is fantastic, and I'd have to put a big thing out there for Piotr as well, who I think that's how it's pronounced. But he's the guitarist, and he probably is my favorite guitarist. Like with the stuff that he's done that's out there, not just in this album but in other ones. I'm not sure if you know, but he died semi recently. Like maybe, I'm not, I don't know, quite a few years ago now. But when he did, I was really shaken because I think he just brings such a beautiful element to, you know, this band's music. And yeah, it's really classy as well. Yeah, check this out. Like, I won't rabbit on about it. Just go look it up. So,
Yeah,
and check
totally
it.
vouching for that. Yeah, yeah. There's also one of my favorites. Is Goosebumps from the first second when it starts whispering. You know, it just takes you. Oof, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, the chanting and that sort of like, I don't know, that echoey beginning is really cool, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah.
my brother's favorite songs, I think, Conceiving You. So, you know, he absolutely loved that song. And for me, I think just a whole lot's great.
I see we have 7 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's do it. What's
All right.
next?
My last album. I got a bit, as it usually goes, I go a bit off track and then I rediscover music again. And I have to say that my rediscovery of music I was thinking like, I was listening to old music. Like I had a period I did not listen to any new music. We're talking like 10 years or something. And then I was listening to Opeth and I thought, man, this drummer is so great from those old Opeth albums from the early 2000s. And I knew he quit. Mendes, Lopez, sorry, Lopez is his name. Martin Lopez. And I thought, what band does he play in today? I had to look it up, and I thought, okay, Soon, however you pronounce this, and that once again, mind blown. Like, oh yeah, this is how it can be. It can be very emotional and more mellow, yet still having the muscle. Yeah, so it has everything, and a mean bass, and you know, it's a very different kind of prog metal than Dream Theater Symphony X. Uh, that is, it's not so show offy as Dream Theater Symphony X. It's more, yeah, emotional, I would say. But yeah, totally. This really got me back on track, and maybe 3 4 years ago when discovering them, and now I'm stuck in this music mode again. So thanks to Martin Lopez new band, who's not so new anymore. They debuted in 2014 or so.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Soen as well. Love their stuff. I'm
Oh yeah,
definitely a fan of Lotus
yeah.
specifically. I think
That's the
Lotus is,
album that got me into it. Yeah, I forgot to mention
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah. And I also don't mind their next one after that too. But but yeah, definitely worth checking that out if you guys haven't. I like that it's very metal. And again, another accessible, really fantastic piece of sort of writing and composition too. My very last one is a big one for me getting back into it too. So what's interesting is fast forward, I don't know, like a decade or two, I was asked the question who my favorite band was. And when asked that question, I decided to really think about it. And this is what launched the progressive wandering like thing for me, is that I really decided to take my music listening seriously and try and work out like, what do I love? And the first album that I discovered when I really started to dive into, sort of music itself, or the first one I fell in love with was Catatonia's um, The Fall of Hearts. And this album is just sensational. Like I don't know, it blew my mind at the time, and I just don't think I've ever heard anything that sort of hit me so emotionally at the time. And as well as that, just it's fantastic composition, it's beautiful. And I know there's a lot of people who really love their sort of heavier sort of sounds and stuff, but for me, this really melodic, tearjerker kind of music is just where it's at for me. And all Old Heart Falls, Decima, I don't know, The Night Subscriber, Residual, like there's just so many great tracks on this album. And it really reinvigorated my passion for music, and was the catalyst for starting this next chapter of my sort of musical sort of life. And since then, I think it was 2002, I discovered these guys. Since then, it's been 3 years of like continuous music listening and just loving what I found, right? And interacting with people like you, Simon, it's sort of set the tone.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks, Catatonia, for bringing us together. All right. Well, good. Um, will you make as good of a job rounding this up as you introduced it, Josh?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's been really cool to like interact with you and find out what these things are. I also think I've got some homework to do. I'm going to check out these
Same,
albums in the
same.
background, and if you haven't heard some of the stuff that I've put up there, like definitely just make sure it's the Catatonia sort of album. It's a corker. And the other stuff maybe will give you a bit of perspective as well. And so this I guess is where it all started for both of us. And hopefully as we continue moving forwards, we'll get the opportunity to, continue, throwing stuff back at each other, and seeing, when I discover something, you discover something, like we'll share it, and hopefully share it with everyone else who's watching today as well. Or at least that's our intention, right? Just sort of just, diving into prog music. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Simon, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Then we'll see you at the next episode.
Yeah, sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
Live long and prosper. Okay, bye.